Now let's talk about variable scope. So what is variable scope? Essentially, it's the parts of a program where a certain variable is accessible. But this also means that when you create a variable, you have to make sure that the part of code that you're writing in has access to that variable. So for instance, if you declare the variable in a separate part that you're writing in, you may not necessarily have access to it, so you just gotta be careful. And this is because local variables will go out of scope once their code block finishes running. So a little more on code blocks later, but first let's look at some code. So here we have a simple program to just display a new variable if I is 0. So there's something wrong with this code. Let's try to figure out what it is. So we start here with creating an integer, and we call it I, and then we're like, if I equals 0, we're going to create a new variable and set its value to 2. And then afterwards, we're going to try to print it out, say, here's my new variable, and then print out our new variable. But it's giving this red underline here, which means that there's something wrong. And this is because the new variable is out of scope. It is not within the same code block as this print statement. So how do you tell what's out of scope? A big hint is to check the code blocks. So a code block is, as illustrated here, kind of where you see the curly braces pair up. So this if statement has an opening curly brace, and then it has a closing one, and then this signifies one code block. So that means anything you create inside this if statement, for example, if you made a variable, that's not pictured here obviously, but if you made a variable, it would only be able to be accessed inside this if statement, not by the else and not by this for loop. So same thing with the else, anything made in here is only accessible by the else, and same with the for loop. So variable scope when using classes is a little different. So basically, when you declare a member variable, which is what these guys are at the top here, pages and author, they can be accessed anywhere in the class. So let's take a look at this. So we have a public void function here, and it's to set the amount of pages. So it takes an input pages number, and it'll update the pages number of this book to whatever you tell it. So notice that the setPages function has access to the pages variable, and that's because it's a member variable. And when we're working with classes, member variables can be accessed anywhere inside the class. So that's about it, but finally, some key takeaways. So just remember that a set of curly brackets defines the scope, and this is what we call a code block. We can access a variable defined within the same set of curly brackets that we were writing in. We can also create member variables that can be accessed by all member methods in the class. And if you want to use a variable after a loop, make sure to declare it before the loop is called, so that it's in the same code block.